Okay, welcome everyone. We are going to start our work session meeting. So today is Tuesday, March the 6th. It is 1 o'clock. The first item on our agenda for today is the Prince Creek Trailhead. Gary, please take it away.
Thank you, Patty. I'm Gary Tenenbaum, the Director of Picken County Open Space and Trails. And with me, somewhere in the background, is Jesse Young, who is our environmental planner. And today, we're here to give you an update on Prince Creek parking options and to get direction on bringing back a budget supplemental so we can potentially get this area built. So, at the last Open Space and Trails Board meeting on February 22nd, the Open Space and Trails Board recommended to fund a parking option that I'll show you today, and at a cost of about $195,000. But as background on this project, as everybody knows, the parking issues and the bike pedestrian safety issues along Prince Creek Road in this area of where the Crown is, due to the expansion of trails in the Crown, this area has gotten extremely popular. And the BOCC and Open Space Board has been working on trying to find a solution to this area and to this issue. And, it was 7 years ago that we started on this journey, and we were working with private property owners in that area and the BLM. And, through a land exchange and purchases for parking potential options at the Bullpen in this area, we're able to start the planning. And in 2017, the Open Space and Trails Department did a management plan with a lot of public input. And, you can look at this map of this area up here, and you can see this goes to Carbondale. This is the top of Prince Creek Road, and where Prince Creek Road and West Soapers Creek Road come in. And so when you look at this entire area, this is what we're talking about, is basically when you hit into the private lands. This is all in Picken County. And so currently there's a whole bunch of parking that happens up by Handy Drive, and that area is, overrun at certain times of the year with cars. It's, you're not allowed to park on county roads, but this is one of those areas where else do you park? So the BLM went through their resource management planning effort. The BLM declared the Crown a special recreation management area with an emphasis for mountain biking. This lower Prince Creek area has seen an expansion and continues to see an expansion of mountain bike trails. We have worked with the BLM on potential parking options. There's, you could see the P's on the map up here. The current parking areas are up here at the top of where West Soapers Creek Road is. And, right now is doing it kind of illegally, just a big mess down here. There's some parking in the middle, but it's not very well designated, and it doesn't accommodate all the different types of uses that it has. So when you look at the overall goal is to provide, some separation and safety for the bike and pedestrian traffic on Prince Creek Road. That's happening now. There's a lot of traffic that happens on Prince Creek Road through this area. And then also to try to deal with this parking issue, we looked at options and, trying to find some options on the BLM, but that doesn't solve the bike pedestrian safety issue necessarily on this entire road if you're bringing cars all the way up to here. So in the management plan, what we came up with was to use the trail corridor that was purchased through that land exchange. It's about 2 miles as a trail, and then look for parking options as low down on Prince Creek Road as possible. And so what we came up with was, after looking through different options, on the property that the Picken County owns, but also other private property options in that area, in the end, what came out on top was, where'd it go? what came out was a parking area on the Bullpen. So the Bullpen area, here's Stark Mesa Road. This is towards Carbondale. This is up towards the Crown, and the where the Handy Drive used to be is up way up here. It is about 2 miles down the road. This Bullpen parcel was purchased by the county as a potential parking area for this to solve this issue of parking. And so we have worked with the neighbors in this area, and we've worked with the public on designing this parking area. And in the design of the parking area, what we came up with was trying to solve for the majority of the parking issue and not creating, you know, the huge parking lot that could potentially solve all your problems for the future, but to solve the main parking issues right now. And so this is about a 35 parking space parking lot with access to the existing trails here. Right now, we are showing a raised crosswalk here. The Open Space Board heard from the neighbors about safety in this area. You know, safety in this area is a big issue. The Open Space Board would love to see potential speed tables on this. However, in working with the Public Works Department, you know, this is a pretty low-use road overall. And with a low-use road, they don't usually put speed tables on it, especially for snow plowing. Garfield County snow plows this for us in the winter. And so that could be a potential. They're not excited about using to be plowing on speed tables, but in the end, that's a BOCC decision, and we can make that decision. You don't have to make it today. You can make it during the budget supplemental that comes through, and we can flag that for you. But right now, we have a raised speed table just at the crossing, adequate signage, very adequate signage, lowering the speed limit in this area to 25 miles an hour, and helping with sight lines. That, you know, there's some large vegetation that's right here where Prince Creek comes under the Prince Creek Road. And so we want to fix this because right now the culvert is undersized, so we want to make it bigger. That's included in this cost estimate. And then do some vegetation clearing, which would actually make it safer for Stark Mesa Road, for this private driveway, and for the trail in this area. So, you know, we looked at other options potentially on the other side of the road. We looked at options on private property in the end, and we looked at options with the BLM. And really putting it way up on the road creates more traffic on this road, which is something we do not want. And so that was, this is the parking area that was ended up being recommended to the BOCC for construction in the spring of this year. So, you know, one of the directions we'd like to see is if you guys would recommend us bringing back a budget supplemental, the cost of all of this, including a speed table, the signage, you know, the increasing the culvert size, the parking area, a bathroom shelter, and a lot of vegetation screening. So we would soften the impact of this area. We also included in the budget potential vegetation screening on some private property up above. There is a private landowner that does look down on this. There's one. And that we would definitely would like to offer. We have done that in the past on projects. We have offered screening on private property to soften the impacts of trailheads. We did it at Glacier, and we've done it at Drosty, at Bruce Drosty's, and for the Brush Creek Trail. And, you know, we could do it here, and that would be an offer to the landowner to, you know, for our funding to help them screen this parking area. Overall, you know, there's also the one thing is trailer parking was not included in this parking area. It's not included in the management plan. You know, we did hear a lot from the Rolling Fork Horse Council. Holly is here. And one of the things the Open Space Board would like us to do and recommend to you guys is to write a letter to the BLM requesting that equestrian parking be placed higher up on the road where the equestrian trails start.
Can you show us on the map?
I can. And the good thing is I had a conversation with the BLM. Let me get that full view up. So, if I can, you can see that on this area. Right here, is where BLM Road 8320 takes off, and that road is really the road for equestrian access in the middle part. There is also equestrian trailer parking at the top, and the BLM is open to working on making that even better for trailer parking. But this is one area that the Open Space Board said we should encourage the BLM, and through a letter through the BOCC and Open Space Board to encourage them to do it. I spoke to the BLM last week, and you know they are open to it. They want to help solve this issue, and I don't even know if it'll be a funding issue. I think at first they were like, oh, you don't have to send a letter, we'll just deal with it. I'm like, I think we need to send the letter and make sure that it's a priority for them to provide some trailer parking in this area. So that is on your direction. We will create that letter and then have Patty sign it and send it out to the BLM. And so
this letter basically just supports BLM expanding the parking for trailers and horse trailers and trucks in that location, or
well, in this area. We don't want to
them choose the location.
Let them choose the location, but choose it in an area that's right near 83, right near that trail,
right,
or right on that trail. There's options there, and I feel that we should encourage them to work with the Roaring Fork Valley Horse Council. RFMBA was also supportive of this, the Roaring Fork Mountain Bike Association. It helps to separate use, and that's what's going to be. That's the goal of BLM here, is to separate use, and not build a ton of new trails, but to really use existing trails and designate them correctly and have the appropriate uses on each area. So this is going to be heavily, and it already is, heavily a mountain bike area, and and so this would be the better area for the equestrians to have access on this side. So we are definitely, the Open Space Board was in support of that, and on your direction, I'll get that letter drafted as soon as possible and get Patty to sign it.
I'd support that.
Okay.
So, George?
No,
You waiting that?
I'm not sure we're ready to support or not support at this point, but
Oh, you're supporting the letter.
George, is your mic on?
yeah, I'm
So,
just not.
yeah, so I mean, honestly, right now, that's it. And so we're looking for direction to come back to you with a budget supplemental and to move forward with going out to bid and everything else, contingent on final funding and location and extent land use approval.
George, before I go to comment, let me just say that, just so the public and everyone knows, this is a BOCC work session, so we don't generally entertain public comment. But seeing that there's not a lot of public, we may see if you guys want to jump in here. But also, so that the public knows, Rachel Richards is not here today. She's at a National Association of Counties meeting in Washington, D.C., and Steve Child is not here today because he's at a farmers organization meeting. I believe he's in Kansas.
National Farmers Union.
National Farmers Union. So, okay, George, you want to go ahead?
Oh, thanks, Patty. I got a couple of questions. You pull up the year, that first map. So when I was reading through the packet, Gary, there was the two options between the east side and the north side. So the north option had some positive amenities, and it had some. So I guess what were sort of the pros and the cons when you looked at the north? Because there were a lot of comments supporting the north parking versus the east parking.
So I put up the north parking option for you. When you start looking about, some of the comments was that it keeps all the trail on one side. It is a lot more visible, even though it might not be as impactful to the other side nearer to Prince Creek. But the real big negative, we just didn't see the public benefit for the cost. The cost was over $300,000 more because you have to move Prince Creek Road. So for the cost, that was not, at least staff's recommendation, and the Open Space Board agreed with it, that the cost did not warrant to spend $300,000 more for this, where the east side is, it is better screened, and, it does have that potential in the future for expansion, but it also, you're crossing Prince Creek Road, which with adequate signage, potential some, a speed table at the crossing or speed tables. I mean, it's going to be pretty safe. We have this in a lot of places. We have trails cross roads, and with adequate signage for both the trail users and the vehicles, we felt that was safe, and there wasn't enough benefit. The pros didn't outweigh the cost benefit, the cost cons.
And then on this map, what is the crosswalk potential raised crossing table? Is that like a bump, or what is that?
It's not a bump, it's a speed table. So it's basically a concrete, it's got a rises and it's got a flat area on top. It's kind of like what we've done on Red Mountain Road. It's a lot of the speed tables you see on Cemetery Lane. And so they're speed tables, so it's a table on top that the users go straight across that table, but the cars know they're coming to a bump, so that it slows them down, even if there's no speed tables in front or after.
Isn't that a concern for Garfield County Road and Bridge for plowing that more so than a speed bump?
No, speed tables made out of concrete are a lot easier to deal with than just a asphalt bump. This would be raised and done in a way that, Highlands has a crossing like this at Highlands.
Yeah.
And they're not excited about it, but in the end, this was created by the project engineer for Picken County, and so this is definitely a safe option. It would be safe. We have the Rio Grande and Lower River Road doesn't have this, and it is safe. So it could be safe without it. We were just responding to public concerns about safety in this area, and so having the raised just adds that extra level of safety. In the end, it is up to the Board of County Commissioners to determine what to do to Prince Creek Road for speed tables or not.
And then is there an advantage for plowing having dips versus bumps?
Dips are difficult because, for snow plowing, I think it's, I would have to ask them about that, and I could bring that back to see the difference between a dip and a bump. You wouldn't want to do a dip at a crossing. You'd want to do dips because you wouldn't want the trail user to go down into something because it could hold water or ice or whatever. So that's one concern about a dip. You wouldn't do it at the crossing, but you could do dips instead of speed tables.
Right.
And so we could ask them about that.
Yeah, I mean, Thompson Road going up to Spring Gulch has dips, and in the wintertime it doesn't seem to be a problem going up towards Spring Gulch.
Well, they fill up.
They fill up, right.
They fill up with snow, so basically that's the thing. It's just that,
And for the most part, we're not going to be, for the most part, these trails will be closed in the wintertime anyway for winter closures, correct?
For the most part, they're not going to be really that used in the winter.
Yeah. The other question I have is, two other questions. One, you talked about the BLM in terms of participating and looking at providing different parking options for the equestrians. I would, and you mentioned that you didn't think funding was an issue. I would question that comment, and I would make sure we get some funding allocated for this, knowing how their budget is.
Funding from our side?
No, funding from the BLM. I mean,
Yeah,
the BLM is the one that's really sort of created this challenge for us when they first designated this as SRMA, and we, Picken County, really were not supportive of that designation for a lot of these reasons, but they went ahead and did that anyway. So I think it's their responsibility to come up with adequate funding to address. They're doing some small campgrounds to address the equestrian parking and any other needs, probably including a resource person to try to monitor use up there. I know we've had complaints from neighbors on the Soapers Mountain Ranch side in terms of parties going on up there and bonfires and concerns about wildfire, and certainly this summer would be a big concern. So they need to be part of that role for them. The other, when I was reading through the comments, one of the issues or concerns about the east side was that it's sort of a positive and negative. One was that this east side allows for an expansion of parking. And there was concern that, which I share, that you can get to a point where it's just becoming over-inundated with cars and people. And I would not really be supportive of a large expansion of parking in the future because we're just, it's the same old story. We're loving the area to death. I think we need to look at future parking options. I'm sure you have, such as the Carbondale High School. And this is predominantly being used by bikers, and I'm sure bikers can ride an additional couple miles versus having to park and having to expand our parking lot. So that would be a concern of mine as we go down the road and see how this lot is currently getting used and where the future demand is. The other concern about the neighbors is on weekends when this parking lot may get full, will they have the same problem with cars continuing to park along the road? So we'll need to have some support from our public safety officers to cruise in there on weekends and provide warnings and ticketing for those cars that are illegally parking on county roads. So I think we need to be strong with our enforcement on that.
We agree with that, and we're gonna, between John and I, are gonna work with Joe to, especially once this area gets built and the other area gets closed off, that we're gonna try to do a targeted patrol of this area to educate people on where you can and cannot park. I think that's, it's a good concern. Carrying capacity of an area is a big issue, and that's why there is also an option in the future to sell part of this property, and you can sell it for a residential lot. So you don't want to make that decision now. I think, right now we're also working on a town to crown public campaign to get people to park in town, get people to park. In the summer, you can park at the high school. So to get people to park and come to Crown. Garfield County is repaving that section, their section of Prince Creek Road this year. So it should be, they're going to make it wider, as wide as possible, fix the pavement issues, so it'll be safer on Prince Creek Road to bike. So hopefully those efforts and, the efforts of, making sure that people are parking, they'll get the message, and that's what will happen. And so we'll see how it goes, but we do have an option to expand if needed, but we agree right now that 35 is almost exactly what we created at Glacier. We're not filling it up, except for on the most busy of weekends. And I think this should, if done correctly and it's not haphazard all over the place, this should suffice for 99% of the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Greg, please.
Hey, Gary, can you show us? So I see where the north side has an expansion potential. Where's the expansion potential in this if it comes up, and it probably will at some date?
See, the north side really didn't have much, it had a little expansion area.
Yeah.
It didn't have a lot. It's like 10 spaces. It only could be 30 right now and then maybe 10.
Okay.
So this side obviously has a lot more because we own this entire piece.
Right.
And so, right now, we're not proposing to use it, and we're going to definitely do everything to make sure no one uses it and see what happens as this gets built out. So the other side, one of the things is, you could expand to this side. I'm like, well, then you're negating the benefits of this if you're going to have a crossing of the road.
Yeah. Now, when you bring us the budget for all this, it'll be a la carte, I assume. So the speed table will be an a la carte item.
Correct.
And what your recommendation is, but plus priced out on the various, what type of signage, that sort of thing.
The signage will be pretty. No matter what, it's going to be a slower area. We're going to have a slower area no matter what, and a lot of signage that it's a trail coursing. Do you add a bump sign? That's not much, and so that's not the big issue. The big cost in this area is if you want to do the speed tables,
right,
or just one raised crossing or none. Because the raised crossing doesn't have to be a full speed table. It could just be raised enough to show that it's a change.
To delineate it.
Delineated, and so that really wouldn't affect the snow plowing all that much. And, you know, you can always add speed tables in the future too. So you don't have to do all of that now. That could be a phased approach to see how it goes.
I saw something else in the comments about livestock. You know, where I'm sure as you're designing this, you're looking at, you know, the couple times a year when they're running livestock up and down the road. Assuming that's still an issue, and there will be for the foreseeable future, are there any considerations there that we have to, you know, I guess it's just security to make sure that if things are fenced properly and nothing that's going to entrap an animal or any changes like that. That's part of it, I assume, right?
Yeah, that will be, you know, right now most of the property is fenced and the only openings are going to be at the trail and that. And so we do work really well with Ty Bar Ranch, who's across the street, who's running the cattle, and we will definitely keep in touch to see if that becomes an issue.
And then finally, what's going to keep people from? Does it really solve the current problem? I think George mentioned it. There will be enforcement and closure up on the sides of the road off of the subdivisions where it's been an issue. That's going to be an active closure. We're going to sign that, do a better job, or more boulders, or I guess you can't put boulders in there, but what's going to change there so that people understand that this is the parking area now?
Well, there's going to be signage, and there's going to be some way of closing that off. So it's not going to be just magically still open. Right now, the users have basically created this area.
Right.
That's going to be uncreated. And so Road and Bridge, that's the partnership we're going to have with Public Works. Public Works is going to take care of that once this is fully built out, and they will close it off. It will be very difficult to park. You will be parking on part of the road, and then, you know, we're going to work with the sheriff's office. It doesn't take much. What we found on Glacier, it took, Eagle County helped us out a ton, and they just did targeted enforcement of that area. And magically, once you have an alternative, it's hard to say, well, I didn't see the sign, or where am I supposed to park? And it'll get there. We're going to have an education campaign. I know the first, 2 weeks, 3 weeks is going to be just a little chaos, and we have that everywhere. But wherever we have done this, if the sheriff's on board and our rangers will be there, we'll be able to, and the BLM is going to help too. And the BLM, because they're going to be going up there more. And as George mentioned, I mean, when they put this camp area in, the BLM's presence is going to be more because they're going to have to monitor the camping area and all that stuff. So, we're hoping this three-way partnership could really solve the issues. And the issues of parties in that parking lot, that's totally not going to be tolerated. I mean, between Garfield County Sheriff, Pickens County Sheriff, and our rangers, it's just not going to be tolerated. We will be on that. We're going to do patrols on that, and we're going to make sure that's definitely not an option for anyone.
Will there be any signage that alerts, say, a newcomer to the area, to this area, that this is the place to park, and don't even bother going? Don't drive halfway up or farther up to determine if there's a closer in parking area. I'm just wondering if there's a way we can add a sign that makes sure they realize this is it, so they don't keep going.
Yep.
To be careful
I'm
about too
one of
much
those people
signage
that,
too. So
I agree, but I would be one of those people that would be tempted to drive all the way up to see if there's a place that I could park that would be sweeter.
Closer.
I
But the
think
great
so.
thing is
Right.
what was created last year by RFMBA and RFOV is, those are really fun trails, and people are really liking them. Obviously, we had a problem
Right
with
there.
people parking down there now on the road, and so we gotta solve this, and we're happy to be here now, and hopefully we'll get through the budgeting process and the land use and procurement and get this built early this spring.
Got it. Great.
So for me, the issue is about the speed tables, not the one with the crosswalk. I think that's something we can address as we see fit if we need to. I don't think that's something we need to be addressing right now. As far as the crosswalk table, I think the one at Highlands works extremely well. We had a lot of concerns about how they'd plow over it, how many people would be flying up and down, mainly down, Maroon Creek Road. And I think the design of that table has worked extremely well. So I'm sure that Public Works and Open Space will figure out what's the best option for that. I definitely think we need to have a delineated crosswalk table of some sort. I think the letter to the BLM, George is right, we need to add in those factors of We're really sincere about this. We need your help in creating these parking areas for horse trailers. We need to make sure you're funded with a resource person and help with enforcement. I think those are critical. Expansion of the parking lot and parking in other areas, I agree, especially since Garfield County is going to make some road improvements. You know, we'd love for them to do a continuation of the bike trail specific, but there are ownership of public lands there. There's just an easement area for Garfield County roads, so anything they can do to help is greatly appreciated. You know, we also have the parking at the high school, which in the summer is, you know, pretty vacant there. So, and it's not a bad ride. I mean, I can even ride that, and I don't even ride a bike, but I could walk it definitely. Enforcement, I think a working agreement of some sort. I think Garfield County is right there anyway. Having them help share the issue with enforcement is important. You know, we don't want to be going out of our way to create a workable parking area that people park on the road again and just continue the problems that we've had in the past. Screenage, anything we can do to help screen that with vegetation for the neighbor that was really concerned about that, I think is important. I don't have a problem helping him out with that, them out with that, and putting in some additional screen vegetation for them to screen. And I think the budget is well within reason. I understand, having reading, you know, really appreciate all the comments in here. I went through and put east, north, you know, all the different pros and cons. So I think the cost of doing it on the other side is significant, and the exposure, the visual effect is going to be much greater. So I'm supporting what you have up here now, and then we look forward to getting this done and seeing how it works and accommodating all the users as best we possibly can. George, please.
Gary, we have had an extensive public process, and it's going back to when we first purchased the Bullpen several years ago, and you were meeting Open Space and Trails. We started meeting with the neighbors, getting their input as well. But on your memo, one of the comments were that there were a number of alternate sites recommended for the parking lots along Prince Creek Road, and the group wanted to know why those sites were not considered. So I don't know if that was just an independent comment, but were all these different options explained to the different groups and participants who provided comments or came to public meetings?
Well, we did explain it in to the groups. It was a comment, like, because some people look at parking on the BLM, just park it up there. The reality is, and what we explained during the whole management plan process and everything else, was that we're trying to solve a lot of different issues at once here. We're trying to solve the amount of traffic that's going up this road, the safety issue of having all that traffic with bike and pedestrians on this road, and, you know, trying to find a way to move the parking as far down to keep a lot of that motorized traffic down here. And, you know, we also looked at other private lands in this area, could not secure the rights to do any parking on any of that. So in the end, you know, 7 years ago we came and it's like, this is a pretty good solution, and once we can get it under contract, we'll go through a process to see if it is. In the end, it came back as the best solution. The other option was the other side of the road. And, you know, really, truly, as you saw, that this was, you know, a much more cost-efficient way, and there wasn't enough benefit to do that. Going way up on the BLM doesn't really solve your issue, because then you have tons of cars on the road. And so, you know, this way we created a really cool trail network right next to the road. We got the bikes off the road. It's kind of the best solution that we could possibly have had in this area. And in the end, when you come through it all, you start seeing this, when you saw the trails get built and all of a sudden all the people using it, you know, the biggest flattery sometimes is when people, you know, start parking down there, and I'm like, wait, no, well, we just created another issue, but we're going to solve it with this. And so that's really, we have explained it in the management plan process. We've explained it when we came through at the end of the parking, because we do, that last map showed the parking options that were potentially available on public land. We're not showing the ones that we explored on private, because we didn't acquire any of the necessary approvals, but yeah.
Yeah, good, thanks. Well, I agree with the comments made, and I'm supportive of moving this forward and hopefully getting this done for the next biking season coming right up.
So I know we're running a little over, but I do see 2 members of the public. If you would like to keep comments short, I will entertain public comment just briefly. Sure. You need to come up to the microphone. Just give us your name. Thank you.
Hi, Mike Pritchard with Roaring Fork Mountain Bike Association. I just want to give a quick thanks for all the work that's been undertaken to this point. Staff and the open space trustees have worked for well over more than the past year to get to this point. And I can remember meeting Gary more than 10 years ago, starting to look at this problem. So it's great to have a solution. I am hopeful that Carbondale locals will actually now ride to the trailhead more often because the good trails start right here instead of higher up. And really appreciate this solution in the end because the trails that this accesses are very much bike-focused trails. And as you read in the BLM letter, some of the routes are going to be revised to be bike and foot specific so that will maintain the character of those trails.
Great.
But at the same time, I have also spoken with BLM staff about this potential mid-Prince Creek parking, and looks like there could be a solution there. And while funding is always a problem for the BLM, the fact that they have funding to build the campgrounds that were just approved there means that they should have the equipment to be able to move some soil around and perhaps make the trailer parking happen right away. So thank you so much for all the investment.
Thank you very much.
Question for Mike is,
Yeah.
is this going to be enough parking? Is this, do you anticipate, how many days a year will this lot be maxed?
It will be full on some evenings and some weekends in the spring and the fall. And beyond that, it's really hard to tell, so hopefully we'll have a good program of that town to crown working. I've been talking with Garfield County about their potential to put in some single track in the shoulder of the road. Maybe, this is the first I've heard of the widening of the pavement.
It's not a widening, it's just creating the full width.
So maybe it gets it 18 inches wider. Maybe that helps with making it a little bit more bike friendly on that road.
Great. Thank you. Please.
Well, my name is Holly McLean, and I'm communication chair for the Roaring Fork Valley Horse Council. And the Horse Council wants to thank OST staff and board and the BOCC for including equestrians. It's really important. In 1862, during the Homestead Act, cattlemen created many of these trails that we all hike on and use today. And so we're so pleased to be included, and we are thrilled about the the Mid-Crown parking area, Mid-Country parking area. I'm really excited. I'm glad OST board and staff considered it, and we hope that your letter will make an impression on BLM, and we look forward to helping how we can also.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, bringing it back to the board. Are we done here? Gary, you've got clear direction, I think?
I do.
And thank you. Thank you for bringing it forward. Thank you, Jess.
Great, thanks.
Okay, moving on. Amy, I'm sorry we're a little late. Come on up to Gary's seat here. Can I see?
A nice warm seat, thank you.
I know.
Okay. If I can say it now.
How are ya?
And just before you start, we did receive a letter from Hawk resigning from Open Space and Trails. He's not going to be reapplying. So I just wanted to let you know that because you and I were talking about, we had a brief conversation yesterday just about the process here and how we go about our interviews. So if you'd like to just give your name, and I'm sure the board will start off with, why are you applying for this?
My name is Amy Cape Brown Barrow. I've been in the Valley since '95. I'm a local landscape architect. I own my own design firm. Previously, I worked for both Design Workshop and then...
Is your mic on? Just need to be, just pull it a little closer. And the red light should be on.
I think I see a red light, yes.
Perfect.
Red light means go.
Yes, it means go.
Yeah. I would say I'm applying for the position because I value our open space and trails here. I use them significantly and have used them for the last 20+ plus years. I actually applied for this position probably back in like 98 or 99, being very young and naive and not really understanding what it was all about. I mean, I had talked to Dale Will, and he encouraged me to apply, and it was definitely probably over my head, and a good thing I didn't even get to this stage at that point. But I've been on the board of Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers, or I was on that board for probably 10 years, chaired it for 6. Community service is, I want to say, in my veins. It's part of who I am, who I grew up to be, and I feel it's really important to give back to your community and to be involved. I was on the Basalt Town Council, elected there, and
looking at Gary for help.
Gary and I were on that together, 2006 to 2010. So I understand a bit more of, I want to say, the goings on and the back and forth of what a board does, what the commission does, and that sort of thing. So I understand the public process and how delicate that can be sometimes, and kind of the fine line that you have to walk in the public realm. It's not as easy as maybe some might think at times. But it's a challenge that I'm up for, that I want to say I have done in the past, and
Greg and then George.
I had a chat with Gary yesterday, and I said, so you two were on this board together, you ran together for Basalt Town Council, so I'm just wondering, are you going to have any problem from Gary, managing him? Does he think he's a peer, or is he an employee? How's this relationship going to work?
Yeah, I've known Gary for a long time, so I would say I'm comfortable disagreeing with him and agreeing with him. Right. So I don't see that there's any issues there.
Can you talk a little bit, if you would, about, you've been following open space since '98, I assume, or even earlier, and I'm just wondering, where do you see it going? Where do you see our open space and trails program going, and what do you think the challenges are that you see coming?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. It has been interesting having been here for so long and seeing how it kind of went from a couple of people and staff to now having like 14 or 15 or whatever it is, exponentially more. And seeing the benefits, though, of what that program has been able to accomplish. I think the future is all about like these management plans that have started to come online for each of the different parcels, and how we kind of manage the lands that we have and can allocate finances to improvements like the parking lot out at Crown Mountain. And how can we make sure that the pieces of land and opportunities that we have really mesh with our goals, not only for recreation, but for, just managing those open spaces and being able to leave them open. Not everything has to have a trail, but everything does need, a look at it in terms of how you manage it and how you, provide access or don't provide access. So I think the future is a lot about education and continuing these management plans and, maintenance, how you maintain what you already have. So.
Great.
George, please.
Amy, thanks for applying. For full disclosure, I did meet with Amy last week. We talked about just roles and responsibilities of the board and how the board interacts with the BOCC, so I didn't ask any hard questions for specific issues.
No,
so
he said he'd save those for this forum.
I told Amy I would do that today.
It was the same conversation Amy and I had, and that's exactly, I said the board would be saving these for you.
Absolutely. I just, I want to say that was part of my homework of just trying to make sure that this is what I wanted to get into.
Amy, just from this past presentation on the Prince Creek parking area, so this has gone on for quite a few years. It's definitely was and still is controversial for some people, some of the neighbors. So how do you respond, or how do you come to a decision knowing that there are divergent views, issues and concerns, and you've got different factions around any neighborhood on any issue, whether it be trails, which seems to pop up more than just protecting open space for wildlife. So how do you make those decisions, and how do you deal with those different views and controversies?
Yeah, I think you have to obviously do it with an open mind. I think you have to certainly listen to what everyone's concerns are. They are neighbors and adjacent users and that sort of thing, and just be sure that you truly understand the width and breadth of what you're proposing, how that affects them, how that affects the neighborhood, and take those thoughts into consideration. Certainly ask for their participation in the planning, and if they're available and willing to do something like that. So, you know, I think it's, again, that fine line of just understanding and weighing the different options of what you can provide and what it doesn't provide to that community, and hear their concerns and see how you can incorporate that into the ultimate plan.
And if you can't meet their concerns?
I would say that is, I would say any decision has its pros and cons, and you're not going to be able to potentially make everybody happy. And I think you have to do your best to see what the overall goal is for that project and for the overall community, and do your best on that.
Thank you.
So time commitment. Open Space and Trails meets twice a month now, Gary? I'm looking at Gary. I'll bring Gary up, because they were meeting like every other day, it seemed.
Yes, that is it's a good question, and for all the applicants for the future, I mean, that's one of the things that I always request people to come talk to me, to try to give them a little feel of what the Open Space Board does. Right now, we are still meeting twice a month. We had a retreat to try to find a way to reduce that, but we have a lot on the plate. So the Open Space and Trails Department has been meeting twice a month. And what we see going forward is definitely having one meeting a month that is public focused, and so it's about a 4-hour meeting a month. And the time is usually the first or third Thursday of every month. And then holding a second meeting in case we have negotiations that need to be done. But I see probably that starting in June, July, August. Right at the beginning, we have a lot going on, and so that means and I've warned Amy that it's a time commitment, but our goal is to reduce that time commitment, and through our work plans and working with the BOCC, trying to get a more workable where it could be once a month, but it's still about a 4-hour meeting once a month.
Yeah, well, BOCC 2 was quarterly. Well, it used to be quarterly. You met jointly with us quarterly.
Yes.
And that is kind of in flux right now, too, because of our issues with the Crystal Trail, and that may demand a few more meetings in the interim here.
Yep.
So I just want to make sure that you're okay with that kind of a time schedule.
Right, and I actually met with a bunch of the folks on the board, Open Space and Trails Board. I met with Hawk and Graham and Howie and Tim just through the past 2 years when I want to say I got more focused on this, and they explained a lot about the commitment. And I would say I'm also at a point right now in my life that I'm able to make that commitment. I own my own design firm, so I'm the one who says whether I can take the time off or not. So, so I do know that it's a large time commitment, more than many of the other boards. So yeah,
And so our process right now, we're advertising, right, John and Gary? We're advertising for this seat. We have anybody else we're interviewing? We know of?
We've got one more right now.
So it'll be a little while, and then as soon as we make a decision, we will let you know. And then we have to do a formal resolution of the board during one of our regular meetings. Greg?
I had a couple more things. I'd just love a conversation. I didn't get a chance to talk to you in advance, but I just, we're watching federal and state budgets declining, and I'm thinking personally that at some point we may have the decision to expand what we've already been doing with helping the Forest Service or perhaps the state in maintaining for campgrounds and other areas that might not even be contiguous to our already established open spaces. And I'm just wondering, what do you think about that? Is that something have you contemplated, that our role, open spaces role, might actually expand a bit because we may be the only ones who can afford to take care of something that's really important?
Yeah, definitely. Kind of going back to Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers, they've really kind of stepped up and grown over the last 20 years as well in terms of their ability to come in and help do some of the maintenance on the trails and building of trails and that sort of thing. And the Forest Service also has their kind of group of volunteers and stuff. So I think there are other volunteer organizations within the community that can help the Open Space and Trails Board fulfill that exact role, whether it's a financial obligation or other ways to assist.
It's great
our core group.
You already have that background with the volunteers, so
yeah,
that's wonderful.
So I see that's actually definitely a key component.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Looking forward to assume, you know, I don't know if anybody else, we may have some other people
We have
coming
we
in,
have at least
so
one now. We may have more.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we will
Yeah,
get
and
back
it's
to
through
you.
the end of this month, right?
I
That tends to be.
To March.
Yeah, we tend to post, and of course, if we don't have enough applicants, we post longer. So.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Great. So thank you
problem.
for coming in. It was
Yeah.
a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks,
And
everyone.
we'll let you know as soon
Yeah.
as we know.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yep.
Amy.
Next on our agenda for today is future agendas, I believe.
Can I ask one question?
Certainly.
Since we're just on open space now, since Hawk's seat is up, he's still, is this the same process?
Hawk is up for renewal now, and so he has decided not to supply. Not
Right,
to
but I'm
submit.
just curious about the same process. So we'll just go out and advertise and interview, just like we're doing for Tim's seat.
We haven't opened Tim's seat up yet.
We actually, yeah, so other way around. Hawk's seat was up, and what the board had requested is that for certain boards, we go ahead and advertise the seats and re-interview folks. In this case, Hawk made the decision not to reapply for another term. And so that seat is open, and we also did receive a resignation from Tim, and I still need to look at the charter, Gary, whether it's an appointment by the board, whether we go through the same process or not. Do you have a sense of what that process
yeah,
is?
you would advertise
Like we
and
have.
try to appoint for the rest of Tim's. Tim is up in 2020, so you would advertise and then appoint to that position up until 2020, and then they would have to reapply,
Yeah,
and
okay.
you would have to go through the typical thing, the typical application process.
I think
Great.
the question is, when is Tim resigning? And he moves out of the district, or was it effective as of his letter? I don't think we have an
didn't put a
answer
date
to
on
that.
No, I think we need to confirm that date
Yeah.
still.
Right, because that's what in the open space charter, it does say that you shall reside in the district that you're in. So, but it is at the pleasure of the BOCC. So you guys make the ultimate decision.
He
Yeah.
didn't give us a date.
There wasn't a date, I don't believe, in his letter of
There
resignation.
wasn't a date, but we should contact him. But it seems like we should start advertising for that and start interviewing regardless,
Yes.
because it's a long process, and we want to have someone ready to go.
That's a good idea. We can still do it. So if we could just follow up on that, see what Tim's plans are, and then get a notice out that we are looking for applications for that
Charlotte's in the
seat.
process of getting
Yep.
that going.
Okay, perfect, that's what I
Maybe you
thought.
could just put in the ad, you could put a picture of his shoes and say, fill these shoes.
Well, he's a small person, but he bigger shoes than.
Bigger
Yeah, I was
shoes than
about to
that.
say, I'm like,
Pick,
go
pick
get
the
it.
Senator,
Big
your
NBA
Congressman
player.
Udos, Senator Udos. Okay, we're going to move on to future agendas.
All right.
Mr. Peacock.
Yeah, a few items for you. First, you all should have received an email yesterday. Healthy Rivers and Streams had done a sponsorship for Snowtel, and they have they're doing basically a field trip up McClure Pass this Friday from 8:30 to 4, and they have one seat available for that if there is a commissioner that'd be interested in doing that.
The other conflict we may have with that is not Friday, the meeting with city about the governance of APCHA, or do we know for sure about
Well,
that?
it'd only be for one commissioner, so.
I know, but I
yeah.
don't know how many commissioners
3 here.
are going to be available Friday to go to the APCHA meeting.
Are the others coming, will the others be back by then?
So,
No.
so there's a little bit of confusion
Yeah.
here. The meeting on APCHA governance is just George and Rachel.
Okay,
And it's been canceled as well.
oh, well, then that
I
frees
got
you
an
up.
email this morning, it was canceled.
From who?
I'll have to look.
Adam?
No, I don't know, I'll look, but it's not canceled? I'll-
So part of it might have been, George, there is some confusion because there were two meetings scheduled. One was for capital reserves, the other was for governance. I think it's just one of those.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I
So
think
we
it's
need to
still
find
going.
out who's, I'm not available on Friday to do either, so we should have somebody definitely after the newspaper report today that said that nobody was at the city's meeting last night.
Yeah,
We weren't supposed to be.
We weren't supposed to be.
I did
Yeah.
check with the city. to confirm whether we should be in attendance to participate in that conversation. And the answer was no, this was a work session for the city council. I don't know if APSHA showed up on their own or if they're invited. We'll find that out. But so Friday, we've got the governance meeting that is really just a smaller subcommittee, and it's to prepare for the next joint meeting of both boards. So that won't be till, I want to say, April 10th or so. So George and Rachel will be attending that.
Rachel back?
Yeah, Rachel comes back Thursday night, so she'll be there for Friday.
So if Greg wanted to go snowshoe up McClure?
I'm up for it unless somebody else, I've done some of these things with this.
No, I'm not up for that. I'm not doing that one.
I think it's worthwhile, so I can sign up for that. I want to make sure if Steve is back and he's just eager to do it, I want to make it available to him.
Well, I think we should put you in your here.
Yeah, okay, I'll take it.
I've already put your name down, so we'll get you details, Greg, on where to be.
Okay,
that.
so that covers that off my list.
And then we are still searching for a room, just so you know, for Tuesday's exec session. We're hoping to maybe, it's a joint exec session with Open Space and Trails and the board. We had our the tower room reserved. That's not really an adequate space. We did just learn that Sister Cities is not available. So we're trying to hunt down a room that can accommodate you guys and Open Space and Trails, so they don't have to move locations.
And be not too far from
3
here,
times.
because we'll come back and re-adjourn here, correct?
Yeah. So I know we have a request out to the fire department now, and I don't know if we're having any luck
And
on
I
any
want to,
other
can I
rooms.
just tag on? And so the board knows, I asked John to help us look to see if we could relocate our next work session with Open Space and Trails on the Crystal River Trail to somewhere in the Carbondale area. After those requests, we were unable to find a space. Plus, we want to have access to grassroots so we can tape it and replay it. So the meeting will be here. But we've made an effort.
And it's consistent with the board's process that you laid out to have a work session with the Board of Commissioners and the Open Space and Trails Board to review a proposed trail alignment prior to it going out for public comment. Next week we'll be presenting a proposed structure for the public process for reviewing that proposed trail alignment, and I think you'll see it's weighted heavily to being located in Redstone and Carbondale. So there will be plenty of opportunities both for presentations to be made and to gather public feedback in the communities.
So we're going to be in Redstone. We'll be in the Crystal Valley, Redstone, or Carbondale.
Somewhere along there, wherever we
But
can
we're
find
going to be
enough space.
proposing both Redstone and Carbondale and here in Aspen. Yeah.
Do you have any other future agendas?
Oh. Let me check my electronic brain here. That is it for me on future agendas.
Just so the two of you know, since the rest of the board isn't here, John and I are meeting with Steve Skadron and Steve Barwick. We have a meeting set up. We're going to be talking about future agenda items for our joint meeting with the city. So if you have any thoughts, please send them on to John, and we can see how it gels with what the city would like to talk about. Anybody else have future agenda issues? Yeah, go
I've
ahead,
got a
George.
couple of questions. On March 28th, we have an ordinance for Red Mountain property acquisition. Is that just a placeholder? That's just a placeholder.
Yes.
Okay, and then on, let's see, April 3rd, I had a question. April 3rd. Oh, April 3rd, we have a road safety plan, invited guests do not move. Is that about Smith Hill Road, or is that something different?
I think that is, I will double check that, George, but I do not believe it's specific to Smith Hill Road versus kind of safety planning for our entire network.
It's the broader discussion that GR had brought to us some time ago with some issues that came up with the state for local jurisdictions, road safety issues, I believe.
All right, great, thanks.
we will have a future discussion on Smith Hill when we have something to discuss.
We will be, I've asked Brian just to give an update at the EOTC meeting. Yeah, and Patty, I think you had requested that.
Yeah.
Also, just an update on the conversations that we've started having with CDOT about Smith Hill Way.
Greg, did you have any future agendas?
No, the Smith Hill's good. I was thinking I was going to bring it up in open discussion, but for future discussions with the city as we're looking at things to talk to the city about, I've been getting a lot of input about plastic straws and plastic bags, and communities around the country that are disincentivizing or even banning the use of plastic straws and plastic bags and plastics in general. And I think it's time to have that discussion, and if we did, that would be one to have with the city because it's critical that they're part of it.
Yeah, and Kathy Hall has a bunch of information about straw, the fact you can't recycle any straws.
Right.
And so she's a good touch person on that one, but we'll have to see if the city's even interested in discussing that. So, but never hurts to
It's
try and
funny,
bring it up.
you use a straw for 10 minutes and then it lasts longer than you
People
do.
think you can recycle them, but you cannot recycle plastic straws.
Yeah, but what do
The
you do with milkshakes?
Paper straws work great and they disintegrate.
It's
you
old
know.
school. And I
I
don't
love
think there's any
straws,
such
but they
thing
don't
as a
have to be-
recyclable straw, but there's those things we don't know.
It might be good to have staff look into what the county's capability, because oftentimes, you know, the county's ability to regulate is different and tends to be less in many cases than home rule municipalities. So we can maybe take a look at that, you know, what our range of options are as a county, maybe before having that conversation,
Yeah,
so that we know that.
We'll bring it up with Steve and see if they're even interested at this point. And then if not, we'll bring it back to them again with more information to back it up. I'm not even sure when we're looking at planning our joint meeting. We don't have a date set for that, do we?
I think we have a date now proposed in April, but I've got to
For the actual meeting itself?
confirm that. Yeah.
So we'll see what happens there. Any other items? So we have Kara. Is she,
Oh, I'm.
are you filling in?
Yeah, I'm probably not going to do a great job, but you know, there's a House vote on expulsion on Thursday and Friday, so most of the items that we've been tracking were postponed, so there wasn't a lot of new activity. I'll just update you basically what Kara sent me. For the state legislature, House Bill 18-1205, which was financial relief for health care costs. The committee hearing was rescheduled from last Thursday to this Thursday. We have submitted a letter to that committee based on this board's positions. Senate Bill 18002, Broadband Deployment Board. That was one that we discussed last time. The hearing with proposed amendments was Monday. The committee will take a vote on the amendment either later this week or early next week. We're currently prepping a letter for the committee during their deliberations. House Bill 18-1099, which is Broadband Deployment Level Playing Field. That passed out of committee unanimously. We're tracking it closely as it moves through the Senate, so we should have an update for you next week on that. And then Senate Bill 18001, Transportation Initiative. As you've probably heard, there's a lot of conversation within the past 48 hours on this proposal. We're continuing to monitor that, particularly through our partners like CCI, to keep track until action's needed. I think we have a good sense of the board's position on that, and if something happens between meetings, we'll go ahead and respond. Happily, we are halfway through the state session. Almost halfway
With
through.
so much accomplished.
March 10th. On the federal level, the census funding request letter that we discussed with the city, that was sent on Friday. FCC net neutrality letter was sent last week. We are continuing to work on a letter with multiple entities on the western slope regarding Trump's infrastructure plan, the particular concern there was the changes in the robustness for environmental reviews. Basically, leadership has expressed they plan to discuss this more after November elections, so that's given us quite a bit of time to prep and work with multiple agencies. We are reviewing, there's been a proposal for a Department of Interior restructure. We are continuing to review that. We should be able to provide an update on that in one of our upcoming updates. It's still not entirely clear what all is in that proposal. And then we are tracking, I believe this was at Steve's request, the Veterans Empowerment Act. And that's all I have on the legislative update.
Can we, since we are ahead, is there any way Cindy Hubin can come early?
Let me...
while we are finishing...
Yeah, let me see if she is
that good
bringing
with the
quite
board?
a few staff over.
Yeah, so so the board, there's no any more open discussion. George, did you have anything you wanted?
Yeah, I have one little thing. I got this, we all received this email this morning from Charlotte saying there's been a request that we gather a few snack items and create a snack basket.
This is critical.
Well, it's more a process that I'm concerned about, that if a commissioner makes a request to a staff person, it puts a staff person feeling they have to do something immediately without having the full support and discussion by the BOCC, whether that's a request that we all agree with. So
We
the
had this-
process, unless I missed it, maybe I was out that day.
Sorry.
So this might fall on me a little bit too, George, is that particularly as we've had late meetings and such, I had actually asked that we have some snack items and such available for the board, and I think Charlotte's request, just to kind of see if there are particular items that we had put in there, and we had talked about, I think, briefly at the retreat, if I recall it. There was a discussion, I can't remember now if it was at the
We've talked
retreat
about
or
it in the
work
past.
session. It wasn't necessarily a decision point so much as a, hey, we're going to look at having some snacks available just in case meetings are running long and such unexpectedly. So I apologize if that was a breach of etiquette for you guys. So that's actually something I had requested.
And I took it a little step further because we've, in the past years, before your two were on the board, we did have just a small basket of stuff. So if during a meeting somebody felt they needed a little nutritional balance, because when blood sugars drop, people seem to get a little on the irritable side. I can speak directly for myself, but it was just something we had talked about. We're just going to see how it goes, and it's not going to be any big array of spectacular snacks. It's just going to be something if the board wants to avail themselves of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea. I didn't understand the process.
Oh, yeah.
That's
And I volunteered, since I usually come over and set the room up, take out the name tags, put up the agendas. I'll just run it back and forth from the meeting room. Because I used to keep my own here, and somebody would clean out the refrigerator and throw all my snacks away. So I have volunteered to be the runner of the snack basket, because I'm right here, and it's easy for me to do.
Tom Blake drank beer at every
Well,
meeting.
if you would
I'm
like
just
that, we
thinking,
can have
why
a
can't we-
six-pack under your desk.
That
Why
would
don't we
have
bring
to be
that
a
one
board
back?
discussion.
Well,
Greg.
and when he popped the last can, the meeting was
This ought to
over.
be a
Did
public
you know that?
meet. We should take this out to the public. I
That's a
think.
true fact. But yeah, George, thanks for bringing that up. Is there anything else?
The one thing I just wanted to mention is that Elizabeth Stewart Severy has been doing a great radio series on recycling. Once again, plastic recycling. Where does it go when it leaves us here? And she tracked the recycling to Denver and talked to the people down there, did a 2-part series, which is worth listening to on KJAX. And it brings up a lot more questions about recycling and where our waste goes. And it's a fantastic series, and I just wanted to point it out. If you haven't seen it or heard it, you should check it out on Aspen Public Radio.
Did she interview Kathy Hall?
I don't know if she interviewed Kathy. I think she was following it to Denver, actually, and going down to where does it end up once it gets trucked to the big sorting
It's
yards.
interesting if she would have included our local recycling person.
Kathy had responded. She was on the same show.
Oh, good.
She's
okay.
probably been in there. I didn't hear that
Oh, good.
section.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah, she was interviewed for it.
Perfect,
and
perfect.
Was a significant part of that reporting. Yeah.
One last thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sure Open Space and Trails will be working on this, but I think we should have a celebration honoring Hawk and Tim for probably close to 50 years of
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
history on the
Definitely.
Open
Good
Space
idea.
and Trails Board.
Yeah,
good idea.
we're probably gonna have quite a few celebrations coming up. You probably also saw that Don Bird announced his
Yeah, he sent a
retirement
lengthy
also.
email.
So we'll be working on all
Yeah,
those.
great.
Yeah.
That's a great, I didn't even think of that, George. Thanks for bringing that up. Anything else before we take our break?
That's it.
And you sent some over to Cindy?
Yeah, I have not heard back from her, but why don't we go ahead and take a 15-minute
15?
break? I'll see if I can
Grassroots,
get
we're
her
going to
back.
take 15. Thank you.
It seemed rude to call while you guys were talking.
work session for Tuesday, March the 6th, correct? I don't have my notes in front of me. And just so the public knows, Rachel Richards is at a National Association of Counties meeting in Washington, D.C., and Steve Child is at a National Farmers, is that Greg? Yep. Farmers Union meeting. We believe he's somewhere in Kansas, we think. So we will bring it forward with our next, and I believe our last item on the agenda. Please introduce yourselves as you come to the mic so we know who's speaking. There's the two dancers for our dance troupe.
Those are our soloists, so we're good. Yes. Soloists are here, right.
They're the Prima Ballerinas.
I'm Cindy Hubin. I'm the Community Development Director for Pickens County, and I'm here with the staff of Community Development. Not everyone, unfortunately, could make it today, and because you're a little earlier in your schedule, a couple people will be coming in as we're talking. But Brian Paul, our Chief Building Official, is sitting with me. Suzanne Wolf just let me know she's at Brush Creek on her way. I think she's on the bus, and we're going to get started. But first of all, just thanks for the opportunity to have us come and speak with you. And I'm not sure if I brought that. Oh, darn it. We had an organizational chart that we were going to show you, but I'm not sure that we have it with us. So we're just here to talk about all of this past year's operations, our trends, and the emerging issues that we see in community development. But mostly we're here to say hello, let you know who the staff is, what we've been doing, and really get feedback from you. What we try to do every day is implement your goals. And we have the strategic plan that we live by, and the big part of our strategic plan is the flourishing natural and built environment. As you know, with our building department, there's a lot of influences on the environment, as well as with the land use code. So this was a big year because we have had lots of transition. It was a transition year because environmental health has now moved out of our department into public health, but we still will have a collaborative relationship in that environmental health will be reviewing building permits for all the on-site wastewater treatment systems. And we've also had a big move we haven't moved in 40 years, and we're getting ready for the big move. We had 40 years of land use files. Thank you. We got our scanning funds in order this year, and we were able to take those down to Denver, which I wanted to follow the truck down, but we took the paper files of 40 years down to Denver. They have successfully scanned all of the land use files for us now. We're now in the process of getting those indexed in a way that they can be read by the public and by staff through our Laserfish process, and that's finally really happening. So we're all excited about that.
Well, Cindy, we have heard, the rumor that we have heard is that when you move across the street, you're picking up your iPads and you're walking across the street, maybe a pencil in hand, and that's it.
No pencil.
No.
We don't have paper. So
that's right, you don't have paper anymore. You don't even need pencils.
Yeah. We're going to, I think we're going to do a little video, so stay tuned with YouTube. We're going to have marching across the street to Sergeant Pepper.
That's great.
With our bell bottoms and our laptops. But we have, we're excited because we really are making progress in all that paper. And it's not without a lot of work. And I'm sorry Jeremy Duncan couldn't be here. He's our new senior admin assistant, who has been phenomenal this year in helping us coordinate with a lot of those projects and also with our data conversion projects. And I want to thank BITS for loaning us Skylar Clay, who is really just a part of our team. He has helped us with everything with computers. As you know, we've gone out to look for a permit application tracking system that will make our jobs even, hopefully, that much more efficient in terms of the turnaround time for building permit review, which we have a lot of information for you on today, and also our applications for our planning and the process and how that looks to the public with an online presence. So we're in the process of looking at our one proposal that came in with the RFP and doing our due diligence, and we'll be getting back to you on that. But we put a large list of requirements out there, and it's going to be tough to meet because we have a lot of things we want to accomplish with this new system. But that's taken a lot of time with staff this year. So a lot of my time, a lot of Brian's time, a lot of Jeremy's time, Skylar's time, and Bonnie's time. Bonnie's here today. Bonnie, as you guys may realize, what we did this year is we did a little reorganizing as well. So we created the permit technician position. Bonnie is one of our permit technicians, and she's primarily looking and helping us as we transition. She's working pretty much exclusively right now in all the planning work. How do we write our workflows and make that work and turn that into an automated system is a huge part of what Bonnie's looking at, as well as a lot of our data conversion and making our files work and have the same labeling and all that technical information. We also created two permit technician positions that are primarily working in the building department. And these folks, before I introduce you, are the people who, you've met one before, and I'm not sure you've met our latest edition, but these are the women who sit down with the applicants. They talk to people about their projects, what they're going to submit for a building permit, all of the land use information that's necessary to be submitted in a complete package. And we're really tightening up that submittal process so that basically we're not taking junk in and we get to process it more quickly. And that will come into play with some of Brian's information as he tells you about our turnaround times. But Christy Long is someone who we all just want to bow down to every day. She talks to people, takes them through the process, helps them, and really, I have to say, has a sincere interest in helping people stay active in their positions, in their jobs when we get change orders, making sure those go through smoothly so that people can stay on the job and keep the work flowing. So Christy Long. She's our star.
Hey.
She really is, and we really appreciate her so much.
We had to drag her away from her desk to get her.
And I don't think Gabby came.
She did. She's covering the front.
Gabby Rand is covering the front for us today because Morgan Neely, who's our new front desk position, had to go in for some emergency tooth problems.
We can relate to that, right?
So we have that. John understands that. But so Gabby is our second permit tech, and she's doing a lot of training right now. But we're all learning this new process that we created and how to make it more efficient every day. So you might have questions about that process. You may get comments from the public, and anytime you do, we're really happy to address those and help you understand the process. But we think that we've really shored it up to a good degree where we can be more efficient, but we also know that we can do more, and we continue to work on that. But we are now going to talk a little bit about some of the specifics and what we've done over the last year. And I think I'd like to start with Brian because Brian's done an amazing job of not only looking to the future with our new permit system that we hope to get, but staying in the present with all the building permits that have come through the door. And we've had a record year in terms of number of permits that have come through the door. I was looking at kind of the growth implications of what we've seen. And in our older growth management process that some of you might remember, we used to have a growth management quota system where 24 new units represented almost 3.5% growth rate for Pickens County. And that was brand new units. We had 21 new single-family homes come in this year. However, I'm not sure how many of those were associated with a demolition, so I'm not sure how many were actually new. But so we're looking at a growth rate here that's larger than we've seen in the last couple years in terms of trending. So I just wanted to point that out. But new residential is not our only type of permit, and I want to point out that our priority is to keep change orders moving quickly, because those jobs have already started. Those people are on the job. Those subs are on the job. Those are people that are already out there every day and have expectations of being able to work on a project and get that project done, not only for the client, but for the neighborhood to get that finished and move forward. So I'm going to let Brian talk about all that.
Okay.
The demolition versus the total new starts, I mean, it's, so we know where that growth factor is, plus or minus? Okay, that'd be great. Not asking for it now, but in the future.
Because I didn't break it down that way, but I guess if I would have known that, I could have.
Yeah, in the future. Just would be interesting to know.
Just throwing it out there.
I know that we did 25 demos last year, but I don't know how they correlate with the 21 single families that were processed.
Interesting to know.
2017. That would be
Especially when we're looking at issues with our landfill.
sure.
Exactly.
I wish we had the org chart, because I'm like Christy's new and Gabby's new, and there's probably a lot of new faces. About midway through 2017, we did come back to the board and we'll come back to John and talk about adjusting our budget to accommodate for some roles that we needed to kind of change. And we kind of revamped the whole front desk and the front end with the permit tech situation and how we process that. We had one person that did that in prior years, and then the admin people had to be a technical person and a person who dealt with the people that walked in the front and did a reception type job at the same time. And it was a whole lot to juggle, having to do that technical portion and also be the face of the business. So with that money that we were able to gather in 2017 through the 2.7 adjustment and looking at the number of permits we had to process and the revenue that would be coming in, we were able to make those adjustments before we moved to the new building to create that reception position and those permit tech positions out of existing staff and move some things around. And through doing so, we actually have now a person who meets and greets the public, and that's his job. Morgan is the gatekeeper. And his job is to make sure that staff isn't burdened with just all the walk-ins and the randomness that can happen throughout the day, and kind of screens those calls to make sure that they get to the right people. So Morgan was a big add to the building department whole setup. And then Christy and Gabby Rand were big adds as well. We also kind of have a bigger amount of people in the plans examining and inspection side, which we have now Tony Popish and Jan Patterson primarily in the office doing the plan side of things, and we have Jeff Erickson and Ray Gendron out in the field primarily doing the inspections. And the team is incredible. I have a great staff. They get accolades. They do get criticism because they've been trained to be tough, and the expectation is that we're going to make sure that we're holding people to code minimums, which is what we have in the code. So I'm actually pleased that the board hasn't heard too many complaints about the department, because we guarantee that we are being diligent to do our job with a strong hand and firm hand without being overbearing and too controlling. So I'm thankful that the board hasn't had to hear too many complaints. I do field most of the complaints in-house and try to handle things at our level, at my level, and make sure that things don't escalate to the point of people having to come to the board. So that's kind of been my role, besides the part of doing this whole analysis for the new permit system. Through analyzing the permit system, we've totally revamped and analyzed our whole process and the way we do business. So that's another reason why I'm surprised the board hasn't heard more about what's going on, because we have totally restructured how we asked for permits to come in the first place and how we interact with the public. We've gone fully digital as of January of this year, and I'm surprised that didn't generate more discord and more conflict than it did, but things seem to be going rather smoothly. We get a lot of as I called it the other day, unsolicited positive feedback. So, and I think that's good, because generally you hear the negatives, and you almost always hear the negatives. But to have unsolicited positive without sending out a survey or sending out a request for that, I think is great. And so I commend staff, and I praise my building staff and the planning staff that's part of the building process have really gone through a lot of upheaval and change this year. That's been difficult, and through that.
One second before you get into the details. Yeah. I think it's been amazing this year, because we really, when we tightened up what information we were taking in to our building permit process and the review. We have our front end where the planners and the engineer and all of our referral agencies, environmental health and fire, look at the permit to make sure that it's in compliance with the land use part and the approvals that come along. And then it gets moved on to the building permit part. And a big aha in this new process was that we always thought, oh, it's the building permit stuff. Well, the reality was once it hit Tony Popish and Jan Patterson's desk, they were whipping these permits out so fast. And we found that with the two of these guys looking at permits, they were pumping out permits. I don't know the average, but you do, in less than 10 days. Once we got through all of the real complicated things that Catherine Berg, our engineer, has to look at and take into consideration with all of the things that we put in the planning applications, like the retaining walls or the driveway slopes or the drainage and erosion, and I can't even imagine what else, but all those things. And once we then move that out of making sure that all the planning issues that Joanna and everyone looks at for compliance, and Larissa, everyone looks at for compliance, once it got to the building permit folks and the building plan review, Tony and Jan put their heads down and they would get those permits out in an average of about, you heard it, 10 days. So it's pretty amazing, and we really thank them.
That's incredible.
What was the previous
They cranked.
estimate?
They just cranked.
Our
16
goal was
weeks.
4 to 6 weeks in the
Yeah.
building. That was our goal. We were averaging 12 weeks for the whole process. We're still, for the whole process, we're still looking at 12 weeks, but we were promising 4 to 6 weeks in the building room. We're looking at about a week to 10 days right
Yeah.
now in the building room.
Every little increment that we can, be more efficient for that. We hear from the public. I wish we heard more from the public on those positives, but we'll work on that.
We'll start sending them over.
But
Yeah.
just knowing where that difficulty is in terms of our process a little bit more clearly, in terms of, and you have to think about it. Contractors are there to submit building permits. They aren't thinking about all the land use approvals that are required before that, unless, there's something very specific in a building kind of fashion. So we're reworking with our public to really understand what goes into when you can actually put something on the ground. And it's been great working with the building contractors and the architects. Everybody seems to, not everybody, most people seem to appreciate the clarity in the process. So.
Yeah, as Cindy's saying, we completely dissected the process, and we looked at who's talking to who works back and forth with engineers, who works back and forth with architects, and really kind of analyzed every step and really.
So I'm going to shut up.
I'm kind of you know me, I'm a data freak, and so I broke it down as far as I could, and I went in. Of course, our system is clunky. It's the Eden system that was an ERP system for finance that got converted to be a ComDev system for us. And that's one of the reasons why we're shopping for a new permitting system, is because Eden is so hard to data mine from. I had to do 8 different random reports that did parts and pieces of this information to gather all this information into one place to get something that could be presented to Cindy in one concise method. So I've been working on, she tasked me with this at the end of the year, saying let's do a year-end summary to present to the board. And I've been working on it for the last 3 months, basically, just to get the information I needed to compile this history. So that in itself is an inefficiency that we hope to remedy. But when I started breaking it down, I first saw that we had issued 21 single-family residents in the 2017 year. And I broke it down to how many were under 5,000, how many were between 5 and 10,000, how many were within 10,000. And when I first came with that first 21, 3 of them were part of the paper process. So I said I won't look at those. Those aren't part of the digital realm that we're really trying to analyze and try to figure out how we're doing with this new digital process. And one of them, the owner called and said, I don't want to pick this up till it's about to expire, so I'll see you in 6 months, and didn't show up until the very last day his permit was about to expire and picked it up. So I took him out of the mix. And then there was one that was just a reapplication that we turned around and 0 days, basically. We turned it around across the desk. It took more time to set it up in our new digital system than it did to issue it. So I took those out of the mix and boiled it down to 16, what I call, I guess, the true statistics that I could break down and kind of analyze. And in those 16, we averaged 18.6 weeks in those single-family residences, our big, major homes that were being built. And I thought, boy, that's a scary number. That's, what is that, 4.5 months to get that processed? And I thought, well, let's look at that a little further. So then we broke it down and dissected it. How much of that time was in our hands, and how much of that time was in the public's hands? And when I boiled that down, about 6 of those weeks came out, and we got down to about a 12-week time frame when it was sitting in our laps. Now, to do that, I had to analyze Christy's manual notes that she had entered into the system and Tony's manual notes. So there's not a great way to get that information out yet, and that's hopefully where we're going to be moving with this new permitting system or whatever we end up doing to move forward with that. But I did find out that 6 weeks of that time was totally the responsibility of the applicant to get back to us, either to pay fees during the process or to return information from deficiencies that we requested to have brought back in and revisions to be made. So being able to analyze those numbers is crucial for what we do. And I think knowing how things work, I think we have a better handle on how things work and where the time frames are being kind of expanded and where we can maybe contract and maybe we can find some efficiencies. So
can I
yeah, go ahead.
So when you say half of that time period fell on the responsibility of the applicants. So when the applicants, are they aware that if they're sort of falling behind, that they may get out of line with someone else that's in line, and that would sort of further extend their delay?
Well, we don't really queue them. I mean, we do queue them that way, but while they're out in process, we're processing other permits. So yes, they'll come back and queue in wherever they do queue back in once they bring their revisions in. We do let them know that if something is so drastic that we have to kick them totally out and they have to go back with complete revisions, that then they're going to have to queue back into the process wherever they come back. And they'll have to sometimes even go through another pre-submittal meeting to work through some of the details and to get more nailed down to what we need from them. So I think the awareness is there. We actually, the way we do it now is you get your first submission when you walk in the door, and that's what we call round one. And that goes to the pre-application reviewers, which are planning, zoning, environmental health, fire. And they have the major threshold issues, like if you didn't do something that your land use says you're required to do, building height, location near a stream, location near a geographical or geological element or whatever, then those things get you kicked out because they're major, and there'd be a full redraw if your house is too tall or too big or in the wrong location. So those major threshold things get looked at in our first round of review. So in that first round, they've done their first submission. We look at it, we send them a deficiencies letter, which is a compilation of all the reviewers' comments, zoning comments, engineering comments, environmental health comments. We send those comments back to the applicant. What we've done too is we've asked for one single point of contact, and then they disseminate that information to all of their players that are involved on the external side. So if they have a landscape architect that's doing some of the site work and they have an engineer that's doing the rockfall stuff and the whatever and so on, they're responsible for getting that information out to their players. Because what we found was, what was slowing down the process too, was dealing with all these individuals while we were processing a permit, instead of having one point of contact and being able to funnel that out and back through one location. So we've worked on fixing that as well. And so once that first deficiency letter goes out, whatever time it takes for them to respond, that's on the applicant. And we consider that out of office time when they're actually processing their part of that permit. And then we're free to go ahead and look at other permits and do other things and move forward with other things that are actually more prepared and ready to move forward. So then when those revisions come back, they get queued up again. And in our Bluebeam system, we have what's called sessions, which opens it up for a concurrent review from all those players at once. So it doesn't have to get physically passed from each desk like it used to be in the old days, one piece of paper through everybody's office. They can all go into that file at once and do their notations and mark things up and make comments. So we've gained some efficiencies there because it doesn't have to, I'm waiting for this one, but it's still sitting on so-and-so's
I've heard that
desk.
for years, yeah.
I don't know when I'll get a hold of it. So the nice thing about this is we can all be kind of taking our look. Then if they make it successfully through round one, the fees get paid at that point, the first 60% of the fees, and then it moves forward to building. If they don't make a successful run at round one, we'd go into a round two. In round two, they get one chance to submit again. If they fail in round two, then we say, you're going back to the drawing board. We're doing a hard restart. We're going to go sit down in the conference room. We're going to go over why you can't get through the process and what the deficiencies really are and try to make it better. So we've been holding to that pretty hard. We've had a few. There's been 4 that were actually kicked out. The rest have actually processed without that kick out. But the 4 that have kicked out, they come right back with a really nice submission, and then they get through the process pretty well. So, and I actually take personal interest in those and make sure that they kind of ride through the process without any hiccup and without somebody letting it sit on their desk, not aware that they've already seen most of it, and it's maybe hopefully minor changes. So that's our current process. We're looking at adjusting that a little bit just based on the needs of the business and comments back. So we are kind of making refinements to this whole process as we go. But that's the gist of the process. So then if they make it through round 2, 60% of the fees are collected, it moves on to building. That's when that 10-day of building review comes into play. Hopefully it's that prepared by the time it gets that way, because we've looked at all the threshold items, all the major impact items already dealt with. So now we're looking at sticks and bricks and basic building code, and hopefully a good designer can get through that process. So we've hoped that we've refined it where major threshold things that would have let something sit on a shelf for months at a time are being dealt with in this early process. So by the time it gets to building, it's just a matter of processing something.
So forgive me if I missed this part. When you talk about a 12-week period of time, can you break, so if I'm coming in with a 3,500 square foot house, is it the possibility of me getting through in 10 weeks or 8 weeks or?
You know, those single families, those major ones, that square footage makes a somewhat of an impact, but not as major an impact. It's more what's going on the site and what other components are along it. So a little house could make just as much of an impact.
So I have a little house on a very complicated site, you know, rockfall, stream, all that wildfire, everything you can imagine. It would take longer.
Yeah, complexity is the issue, not size necessarily in that category.
Thank you.
Now, if you looked at all permits combined, so you throw in things like sheds, gates, fences, small miscellaneous things, demos, roofs, all those other things, put those with those 16 single families and the change orders that we do processing those big houses, our average is 7 weeks for all permit types. So our average is right in line with what we're shooting for, the 4 to 6 week goal of that being our average. I just wanted to really analyze these tough ones, the major ones, the complex ones.
Because what we usually hear from the public is it takes forever. It took, months and months and months, and without any explanation of, well, we have to assume responsibility for 10 of those months, because of our issues on our side. We're only hearing that it's the county's fault. Absolutely. And so it's nice to be able to say to the people that we hear from, well, did you have issues? Did you have change orders? Did you have slope factors? Did you need to come back into a different round? Did you not submit a complete application from the get-go? And sometimes if we know, I think, the questions to ask back to the people we're hearing from, I think it makes it better for everybody.
And I'd just like to throw in there, too, that sometimes people don't distinguish between the planning process and the building process. So I heard somebody was like, I've been in there for 8 months or whatever. Turns out that they were in the planning process. They had a major planning review to go through, which P&Z, board, all those things that you have to do with certain applications, and they were including that time in the count. So that's another question to ask. Do you have your land use approvals
Yeah.
before you submit. So.
Yeah.
Because we realize their clock starts ticking the day they say, I have the idea of building a house, or I have the
How
idea
about a piece of
putting a
property?
garage." So we know in their minds, their clock starts the day they call and say, I wish to do this, and not really where we're breaking it down to all the way to the building. So, and even our timeline we know includes this pre-review. We were trying to break it down so that we could see where the time really was being spent. And now we know that a lot more than we did in the past. So I'm glad to be able to break it down to this granular level. So.
Because, you know, we also hear from people who say in Montrose County or Delta, I can't remember which one, oh, I walked in and, you know, 2 days later I had my permit, or that same day, 12 hours later. I'm like, how could they do that? Well, they don't give you all the details of what they were actually looking for or what the county codes were.
In some of those jurisdictions, they've already done their land use, they've already done their environmental health work, they've already done it, and it is just the building week. Well, we could say the same thing. Our building permits take 10 days. We could tell people that if that's what we wanted to advertise. But we're looking at the whole process, though. We aren't, because we could do across the table almost with the building review if a designer does everything to our code and we can see that right away.
It moves more smoothly.
In the old days, planning and building were separate. And the Board of County Commissioners at the time felt like it was important to have it all come together and make sure that the left hand knew what was happening with the right hand, and that we really weren't just putting things on the ground that didn't comply with what was approved. So we're just doing so much, you know, more to ensure that that happens.
When did that joining of the two departments happen?
Oh boy, it would have been in the mid-90s. When we created community development.
Okay. So I guess the last number I want to touch on is, like Cindy said, we give priority to field-driven change orders. So if one of my inspectors goes out and said, you moved that footing from here to there, or you changed that wall height by a foot, and they have to come in and get a change order to that effect, my policy is you don't move forward with those changes in the field till your paperwork matches what you're going to do, so that nobody puts something in the ground just because they have a permit being reviewed. They need to have that issued and in their hands before they move forward. But because if we make them do that and hold to that standard, we put those to the front of the queue and let those process first. So our average on change orders is 3 weeks. So we isolated just the change orders out, and the projects that are in process, our overall average on change orders is 3 weeks. Some are much less, some are a little more.
Depending upon the extent.
So those are the numbers. If you're interested, I could show you the whole breakdown, but I'm sure I've probably given you as much as you probably want to see in one day.
And, you know, definitely Brian has a lot more to talk about, but just real quickly, Brian continues to work on the energy code and the addendum to the energy code. We've just recently gotten some numbers from Holy Cross and Black Hills. We'll be bringing that forward to you with our energy analyst, August Haas, and talking a little bit about those statistics so that we can make you can make determinations on which way you want to go as far as some of the requirements in that energy code addendum. So
we were able to go away and build that study that we did larger. Cindy worked with the providers in the area to get a broader study. So the original study numbers that we brought to you have been expanded. And it's looking good that it's still kind of reinforced. We don't want to publish anything yet, but it's looking like it's going to reinforce our original analysis. So we're very happy with the results of that study, and should be able to bring that forward, along with the matrix that we talked about in 2016, and some of those changes and adjustments to the energy code. And on that, I'd like to just stress that I know I keep seeing emails from Greg about different areas going to net zero and net zero ready and some of these other programs. If you read the fine print, and a lot of those programs are being presented to communities that don't even have an energy code yet. We already have a very strong 2015 energy code adopted. And so some of those are alternative methods and ways to get to at least to where 2015 energy code is. So in some ways we're ahead of the game and ahead of the curve. The matrix items that I was hoping to add as the addendum, we're kind of fine-tuning some of the anomalies that we have, the large homes, the glass houses, some of those things that are something specific to Pickens County that we could make a difference with. So when we come back and start doing that energy addendum talk again, I'd like to kind of refocus in that energy towards how we can make a difference in impacting the differences in our built environment than most. So.
Yeah, George.
And so Cindy, and we're going to utilize that information not only for the energy code addendum, but also our conversation as it regards to house size, TDRs. It all kind of ties together.
It does. And Ellen's here in a minute. We're going to talk about what we can call long-range planning and where we're headed with kind of an overall look at infrastructure and energy and how that relates to the land use policies and code. So,
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, as a side note, the tiny home code.
Yep. And that's a good point. I realized when I kept looking out at our posted 2015 code adoption and seeing the red line version online and wondering why it was still in existence, that falls on me. Being the new building official and new to the fact I was supposed to bring a cleaned up version to second reading. So I will be bringing forward a cleaned version of the 2015 code so that we can readopt the 2015 codes. At that time, if the board wants to discuss the tiny home addendum from the 18 code.
And I know the International Residential Code did an
it's
addendum.
In the 18.
Has it been adopted?
It's still
on that
in
flux?
the pre-approval stage.
Yeah, because I think we're going to see emerging issues related
We are
to tiny
already
homes, and I'd
hearing
really like to be ahead
murmurs.
of that curve. Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Brian.
Sure. But be aware that I will be coming forward with a readoption of the 2015 code. Kind of a housekeeping, I guess.
Yeah, thanks. I'm building one, so.
Thank you.
Not in Pickens County.
Definition of tiny home right now, are we talking 250, 300 square feet? Is that kind of what we're looking at?
We don't know.
Aspen tiny home may be a little different. No. You know, that's one thing we'll have to define, and we'll have to define minimum room size if we want to go. So there's some parameters we'll have
And
to
there's
work
some
out.
guidelines out there already that we can take into consideration, so it's not like we're starting from scratch.
No, but we don't want to move forward with the building side of things until we've worked on the land use side of things.
Yeah.
Because deciding where they can go and where they're allowed is more
kind of
important
zoning
to go forward before we decide how we'd inspect them and how we'd build them.
Right. I was also just thinking about our conversation with Mike Kostrowski when he was here with APSHA, and there was a discussion of how small could an employee or an affordable housing unit get, and I know there was some pushback when he went under 500 square feet for a single unit. I thought, that's about twice the size of a tiny home, so
In some cases, yeah.
hopefully we'll all be coordinated on that one.
The 2015 code took out the 120 square foot minimum room size for a living area, which reduced the minimum dwelling size that could be allowed. It kept in the 70 square foot or minimum 7 foot dimension of like a sleeping room or a bedroom, but that's about the only dimension that's still governed by building code. Right. So a lot of this will have to fall into land use ordinances or building addendums or amendments to actually, if we want to start dictating a minimum size or minimum room size.
Just see where it goes. Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks, Brian.
all right. So I think now, just Suzanne, if you don't mind, for a second coming up and what's on our plate and what we've seen. I think we saw about 134 land use applications. I could be wrong, something like that in 2017. It's pretty much on par with some of the bigger years. But I'll let Suzanne talk a little bit about that and what we're trying to accomplish coming forward in terms of some code amendments.
What was
And
the
Suzanne-
number again? 174? Did you use
134.
134 is what comes to mind.
Well, I want to thank Suzanne for being here. I know you have a very sick young man at home, your son, so thank you for being here.
Getting better.
Oh, good.
We're on the upswing today.
Glad to hear that.
We're done with the 103-degree temperature.
Yes.
So
You stay well.
Yeah.
I'm
yeah.
staying away
So
from
far, so good. I know. I'm sitting over there. It's not that I don't like the staff. Just making sure. So I'm a little less prepared than Brian, and I'm not sure what Cindy said to introduce everything. So, but I'll jump in. I mean, I think you all see us a little more regularly than you see a lot of the rest of our staff. So I think you know that we're busy on the planning side. Right. I mean, I think our numbers last year were on par with some bigger years. I quickly got numbers for new applications this year, similar. We're seeing some bigger stuff coming through, that always sort of ebbs and flows. We have times where, we're doing a lot of site plan and activity envelope reviews, and we're still doing all of those. And you all don't see those, so you aren't necessarily aware of kind of the volume of that. But you do see the bigger things, and I think you're aware there's some big ones coming down the pike that are in front of the P&Z right now. Today, the Redstone Castle will have their first hearing with the P&Z on their full rezoning application. And in the last couple of weeks, the P&Z has looked at the Highland Ranch application, which is also something I think that had come to you in sort of a application round for a historic designation for the property up the Highland Bavarian Lodge for the historic designation. So that is now through the P&Z and will be coming to you all shortly. But we've actually had a number of things rolling in that come up to the board or come to the P&Z location and extent reviews. We're going to have our first 1041 review under the new regulations, and it wasn't necessarily where we anticipated that landing. I think you're aware of the solar project on the Aspen Sanitation land close to Smith Hill Road. That is considered a public utility, and it requires 1041 review, which requires P&Z review and BOCC review. So we've had I won't say, maybe struggle's the right word, but it was challenging for us to really figure out, oh gosh, what does this process look like? And they're on a tight time frame, so that may be something we'll have to discuss further with you at some point. But anyway, so there's some interesting different types of applications rolling through. We're seeing several special event venue applications coming in, and those will come up to the BOCC. So some of that is filling our plate, along with everybody who wants to get through their site plan review and be through their permit process so they could build this summer. Which at this point, they're kind of out of the ballpark on that one. We're telling people when they come in the door with a site plan application, it's taking us 90 to 120 days to get through those, with just noticing and just the volume of what we're processing. So whereas the thought was that if we had more sort of administrative reviews that we might be able to do more quickly and they wouldn't need to go through the P&Z or the board or the hearing officer, those still are taking a lot of time just given the volume of them. In the last year, we had a number of those that go to appeal and end up in front of the hearing officer. Or go through objections and end up in front of the hearing officer. So again, that's just kind of a never-ending slew of stuff coming our way on the planning side. Given that, we've been talking for quite a few years now about trying to work on the code. And we have a very long list of code amendments that whenever one pops up, whether it's in your meetings or our meetings or anyone else, we throw them on the list, and it just keeps growing. So we're really hopeful that we'll be able to start chipping away at that. And I think I've tried to take a little narrower view of, let's pull out the pieces that we can feel like we can make some progress on and move forward, and not be thinking so big as to the entire code. We need to pull out those pieces that really are affecting our day-to-day, those site plan reviews. If we can do a better job with those, will that make it better when people roll in for building permit? So some of those efficiencies and really addressing issues better upfront rather than having things in the building permit process go, oh, wait a minute, there's a big septic issue that we didn't anticipate, then we're backtracking. So the better job we can do up front with the site plan reviews, hopefully that also impacts that building side review of things.
I think I'd also like to just throw in there, and I should have done this in the intro, but right up there with Skylar working with us from BITS, we really want to acknowledge how helpful Rye Neely has been as from the attorney's office as the primary attorney working with us on land use applications. He's come to our staff meetings. He works with us on a daily basis on those, tricky situations and code interpretations and legal foundations that we work with every day. And I know Suzanne and Rye have worked very close together, and I just wanted to acknowledge how much we appreciate Rye.
Yeah,
And
that's
Suzanne,
a huge
would-
benefit. And just on that, just quickly, he's also been coming to hearing officer meetings, Board of Adjustment meetings,
Wow.
P&Z meetings. So it's a huge benefit for us as well as, those citizen boards to have that resource available to them. So.
Yeah. And would you also introduce your staff? Because I see you have one staff member here, and the other one is maybe home with new baby.
No, Tammy Cochin's back there.
Hi, Tammy.
And, do you all know Alyssa Dixon, our code enforcement officer?
We've seen her walking through the office.
And then Mike, I think, is probably prepping for the Castle meeting tonight.
Oh, right.
Because that's a big one.
Right, that's a big one for him.
So,
thank you.
anyway, yes, you're welcome.
Yeah, and also,
I guess I missed out in the beginning, so I don't know who didn't get introduced. So, Catherine Christoph, formerly Berg,
I was
who's
going to say,
planning engineer. So we're missing Joanna and Larissa on our sort of planner zoner permit review team.
I also just want to say it's Suzanne's division that's had all the babies this year. So I don't know what to say about that.
must be in the water in the back of the office building.
So yeah, we're having some juggling of staff and their time and their availability, and we're throwing all that in the mix too with just the
Sense of community.
the volume of things that are coming in. So, is there anything else?
And we're really excited about all that. I just a two seconds on code enforcement. I think Alyssa Dixon has just done a great job. I hear very little about problems out there. I think Alyssa has a handle on it, has a very experienced and seasoned way of dealing with the code enforcement issues. And it's, as you recall, this position is not just a comm dev position to look at zoning enforcement and code enforcement. It also, I think Public Works would be saying the same thing. They're just pleased with Alyssa's work, as well as we have some pretty strange ones out there as far as parking in the Hunter Creek Valley, and believe it or not, that goes to senior services, and that ordinance, and we've got all kinds of ordinances out there that Alyssa takes care of for the entire county. So I think that's going really well, and we're very appreciative for her diligence.
It's a tough job.
Yep. So I think that's
Anything else?
all right.
Questions from the board?
Next, I think
Hey,
Ellen.
let me see. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to pick Suzanne's brain with?
Sorry. She's running away.
She's running away.
Ellen, do you mind? So now, just for a second, Ellen, we will give you a little bit about all the things that the Long Range Planning Division, which is Ellen,
Would you please introduce your staff to us?
has been doing. So here we go.
Yeah, so we've talked about timeframes associated with building permits and with the current planning function. One of the focuses of the long range program has been master plans for the caucus areas, and that is an altogether different kind of time frame. It's more like geologic time. We started these master plans updates for the rural caucus areas in 2015, and we have made great progress, in my opinion. We have adopted plans, the Planning and Zoning Commission, have adopted plans for the, Emma, Woody Creek, Crystal River, Frying Pan, Upper Snowmass, and Snowmass Capitol Creek caucus areas, which is really quite amazing. We've had some hiccups along the way that slowed things down with some caucus changes. We had the Snowmass Capitol Creek caucus split, and we had the Maroon Castle caucus split. That slowed things down a little bit, but we have recovered and are moving forward. The Maroon Creek caucus area plan is queued up for adoption in April. It's been a really interesting process, given that caucus area is right on the periphery of the city of Aspen, and Forest Service, and you've got SKICO right there in that valley. So that one has been particularly interesting. We've got the Castle Creek master plan being drafted as we speak, I think. I'm pretty sure, I hope. Brush and Owl Creek caucus plans in the east of Aspen area caucus plan. Those are in the wings. We're thinking that those won't take quite as long to process. We don't anticipate all that much change from the existing plans in those areas. Ultimately, we anticipate working with the town of Basalt on, we were calling the area the gap plan area. It's actually the Highway 82 corridor on the Up Valley side of the town of Basalt, immediately adjacent to their municipal boundary, recognizing that any planning we do there has a significant impact on the town. We have approached them to work with them on that effort, and as they are really swamped and have been for some time, we're waiting for them to have staff and time availability to move forward on that particular plan.
You're talking Holland Hills, Wingo, Lazy Glen, probably to the Conoco station.
Yep,
that kind of
exactly,
neighborhood.
that area.
There's still some development possibility along that.
Yeah.
Ellen, are you also participating in some manner with the updated Mid-Valley, Eagles Mid-Valley master planning efforts?
Yes, Cindy has been in contact with the new Eagle County Community Development Director, and we will be meeting with him next week, I think.
13th.
The 13th, which is next week, to actually talk about specific areas of concern in that Mid-Valley planning update.
Yeah, one of the things that we've talked about, I'm going to try to make that April meeting, but in the past, we've been able to get these current and previous county commissioners to recognize the master plans that sort of cross boundaries, which would be the Emma master plan and the frying pan. So they would so staff would refer to those master plans for any applications that came in within those boundaries. And I think that's really important that as they update their Mid-Valley plans, so they continue to recognize our master plans and refer to them just like we would refer to them.
And to Eagle County's credit, in the past they have worked with us on the frying pan plan and to some degree on the Emma plan as well. So, but I think it is important that we reiterate the need to always acknowledge that crossover in their planning efforts as well.
Yeah, and Damian Perdido, who's the new Community Development Director for Eagle County since, I think, June, he has acknowledged that that he knows about the adjoining plans and has had input from some of the adjoining caucuses, and we're going to discuss some of that on the 13th. And then he's been very open and inviting us to participate in his review meetings on this side of the valley. So
yeah, that's great, because as you mentioned, even working with Basalt, so they understand the impacts even greater of the Mid-Valley. What happens with Eagle County's decisions on land use really impacts the Upper Roaring Fork Valley that much more.
And I think I saw an article in the paper last week that Basalt is really making an effort, or their council hopes to make an effort to work very closely with Picken County and Eagle County on their peripheries in planning efforts.
Yeah, great, thanks.
So one of the questions that Cindy and I get a lot from the caucuses when we start these master plan processes is, well, how are the plans going to be used? Are they going to sit on a shelf, gather dust? Are they worthwhile? And so one of the outcomes of the plans that the caucuses have recently completed is recognition by the caucuses of the need to acknowledge preparedness for climate change. And so it's been interesting because Cindy and I, for the first time ever, I think, have recently been fielding calls from caucus representatives saying, we're really concerned about wildfire. It's a dry year, and hopefully we will get more precipitation and moisture, but what should we be doing to prepare? And so, FYI, Cindy and I have been collaborating with Valerie McDonald, our emergency manager, and she has been coordinating with all of the local, state, and federal fire agencies. And we're pulling together a caucus roundtable on March 13th. And the subject will be wildfire preparedness, with the fire professionals presenting to the caucuses, providing information on how they should be moving forward and taking responsibility for themselves in the event of wildfire.
That's a Tuesday I would love to attend with my involvement with High Country Healthy Forest.
Is it a Tuesday? Is that right?
The 13th
I think it's
is.
March 13th?
March 13th.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'll talk to Valerie with some ideas I might have.
Great, and that will be from 1 to 3 at the Basalt Library, and we've gotten great response from the caucuses. We'll have, I think, a fair number of people there. We've also invited some other counties and municipalities to attend, and some of those will also be there.
Has that been noticed in the, just directly to the caucuses or anywhere else? Is it in the paper, or I'm just wondering, I didn't know about it.
Do you know more? We have, as far as I know, we have not put anything in the paper. That's not a bad idea. We have directly contacted the caucuses, and I have also directly contacted municipalities and counties. Beyond that, I don't believe we've advertised. I don't know if Valerie McDonald has gone beyond her fire agency contacts or not.
And it may be a little overwhelming. I mean, anyone is welcome, but we do have 3 or 4 representatives from each caucus have said yes, they'd like to be there. The room's pretty big, but
yeah, I think the focus would be with the caucuses to say, but that Valerie will then turn around more towards fire season and do a broader countywide, as she always does. And this year, I think she's paying even more heightened attention to that.
And I think we will have some press in the room, so this may be the beginning of a larger public discussion. We'll see where it goes.
I have a note to just give her a call, too. So,
So then, on the theme of wildfire, I'm going to launch into referrals. As you know, we get a lot of requests from various agencies and municipalities for referral comments. And without going into a lot of detail, most recently, we've been coordinating with the U.S. Forest Service on their proposed preemptive forest management actions to reduce wildfire potential in rural portions of the county. And right now, we're looking at 2 prescribed burns and mechanical manipulation up the Crystal River this spring, and more to come on that. I will give you a little more detail at an upcoming meeting. And then Cindy and I, again, on the theme of preparedness, Cindy and I, as you know, have been working on the climate action plan for the county, starting out this past year with a look at our internal organization approach to greenhouse gas reduction, gas emissions reduction. And we are going to launch, we hope, soon, on looking at a more regional look at greenhouse gas emissions reduction, working with CORE, and we'll get back to you when we have more information on that particular action. Then last, Cindy did mention that on the topic of climate change and action and greenhouse gas emissions reduction, she and I will also come back to you with Brian. We are gathering data so that we can really take a close look in developing policy around how we look at our transferable development rights program as it relates to energy consumption and house size and our county infrastructure capacity, and then coming back to you with some real hard data, so that we can start to look at whether we want to make some changes to current policy in any of those realms. And that's all I had. Cindy, is that all?
When are you coming back to us with that? Not to put you on the spot, but just wondering when, how soon, or how far out?
We do have a date I can't remember that we've talked about internally, but it'll be late spring, early summer.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah. And we have a lot of other things going on the long-range plate, but I won't take any more time unless you have specific questions. George, do you have anything?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
So with that, I don't know if anybody on our staff has anything else they want to add, or if you have anything you'd like to ask of us.
I have one thing, because I know we do have a relatively new code enforcement officer. We were without one for quite some time, and just kind of curious how that's going, if there's been any real issues or things that...
Come on up.
Alyssa Dixon.
We really do thank you for a job that we know is not always easy to do.
I would agree with that. But I think everything's gone well. I guess the biggest thing that I have to say is that I appreciate everybody I work with, because I've done code enforcement in a very limited capacity in the past, and obviously the codes here are more elaborate than where I was before, and so it does take a lot of research and a lot of time to get used to the language and the process. And everyone in this room has always been very helpful. If I could just stop in their office and ask them a question, and it's really been just a great experience so far. Even though it's a difficult job, I can't say that I haven't enjoyed it, and I do like the people I work with.
You're still here.
I'm still here.
She keeps
I
showing
didn't
up.
go move my car on the first day, so we're good.
So are you seeing any trends or themes or anything you're seeing that rises to the attention that maybe we might be concerned about, or it's kind of all over the place?
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It really is. And so anything specific or different, or I've looked back on old cases that Patrick was working on, and I don't see anything emerging as a concerning trend at this point.
I'll just jump in that once people find out that Alyssa exists, it's amazing. You know, again, I just think there's so much. I mean, when I just was like, it's all across the board, but people realize now we have a code enforcement officer, and those calls just come in. And it's everything, you know. But it's amazing, sort of. I mean, I think we fended off when, you know, those times when we've been understaffed and just haven't had the capacity to deal with that. And I think when people, as the word gets out that we have somebody available to do that, you know, she has no lack of work, and it just, you know, it just keeps rolling in. So,
Thank you. Any specific questions? No. Thanks for coming up.
Thank you.
Does the board have anything else they wish to say before I say what I wish to say?
Go ahead.
I want to thank you all. You guys do an amazing job. Makes us really proud. Makes us really proud of the staff at Pickens County. Community development, especially in our community, has its challenges. It has its rewards, and it's you know, when you go to other communities and they're like, how do you guys do it? I said, because we have a great staff. We have a staff that works together, who's committed and passionate about public service and looking out for the community and all the issues and areas. And you make me cry. But I think it's hard. Your job you do is hard. Sometimes I know it's overwhelming. I've been involved with community development since the years I was on planning and zoning. So it's been a long time, and I remember Lance having to put up with me on P&Z, which was a learning experience for both of us. But yeah, I think we're really proud of the job that you guys do, and I think we thank you from the bottoms of our heart. So, next round of cookies goes to you guys.
We like cookies.
Let go of that.
Don't tell Human Resources is doing this sugar ban, you know.
Sugar-free, gluten-free cookies.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway.
Cindy, do you have any closing remarks? Or
I don't. Thank you. It's really a great staff, right now. We have, I think, a great combination of new, fresh ideas and energy and a lot of great experience and history to round it out, to do the best job we can for the county. And it's a treat to work for you guys because your values are such that we know we're out there doing the right thing. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
There
you.
go. Brian, did you have something? I see that look on Brian's face.
One thing. We were going to clarify too with the board if we're on the right track with our goals for turnaround times, because we've been working on that assumption.
Increase those.
Did you make them
Just a little
longer?
more wiggle room. No, the 4 to 6 weeks is still our goal, if that's still where the board's comfortable. But we just wanted to make sure we weren't conflicting
Well,
with
I think we knew
growth.
the obstacle we gave you was probably insurmountable when we said we want to see it in this range, because it's got a it's flex. It's you never know what's going to hit you, and you can have one process that's really easy and simple, and another one that's really cumbersome. So we can't say they will all be at this level. We can say that we want an average at this level, and I think you're there. And I think with the new techno stuff they're bringing in, we'll only see more benefits. Let's hope. I think that's the intention of this. Yeah, and if there's anything we can do to help you, or if there's obstacles you think that we need to know about, maybe we can address them, please bring them forward.
We have some inspections we could have you do.
I'm not sure Brian would want me to go out there and do them, but I'm more than willing. You know me, I'll take it on. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys so much. Thanks for coming over. All right, does the board, we are wrapping up, correct? Do we have anything else the board wishes to bring to the attention of Mr. Peacock?
We're good.
All right, then we're going to close this meeting. Grassroots, thank you very much. Kyle, we're done. Thanks.